Thank you, Aisha and Madhav. Welcome, Shashank. Good to have you. I'll straight away get to the main point. If you look at our theme, it's basically a combination of two thought processes. One is how India is a vibrant democracy, and second is global bright spot. We just heard Piyush ji about the whole democratic process, and obviously we are, as a country, we keep getting into elections one after the other. The second part of the theme, global bright spot, that has suddenly become talk of the town on global arena. Now, from that point of view, I think COVID, in a way, benefited Indian economy. I'm not taking away the pains that everybody went through because of COVID. But the real fault lines in the global supply chain and the so-called globalization model emerged post-pandemic. India has obviously benefited. As one of India's largest manufacturer and one of Asia's largest automotive manufacturer, I want to hear your views on how India has emerged as a global bright spot in the post-pandemic world.
Yeah, thank you, Viren. Also, I must say that I will talk largely from an automobile perspective. And clearly, as far as automobile is concerned, India has really bounced back post-COVID. We have seen that in terms of the personal mobility space, COVID has actually made people move away from public transportation towards personal mobility. And also shared mobility. So both cases, we have seen an upspurt in demand as far as personal mobility is concerned. And you see the results very, it's very stark, very clear. This year, we have, in the calendar year, India has crossed the 3.5 million mark already. The previous highest was in 2018, which was 3.39 million. So with still 1.5 months remaining, we find that we have crossed the previous highest. And I think we should end up the calendar year with around 3.8 or 3.85 million. And same goes for the financial year as well. So yes, this is definitely a bright spot, despite the fact that we have had semiconductor issues. Automobile actually requires scale. In India, if you look at India today, it has a scale. It is the largest two-wheeler market, it's the largest tractor market, it is the second largest bus market, it is the third largest large commercial vehicle market, it is the fourth largest automobile market. So in almost all sectors of transportation and mobility, India is ahead. Second, I think government has done a lot in terms of supporting and making India a bright spot through its schemes such as the PLI scheme. So one is scale and the other is investment. PLI has brought in investment and government is supporting investment even in the higher tech areas. For example, for automobile, this works to almost like 53,000 crores. 26,000 crore is PLI for auto and components. 10,000 crore for the advanced cell chemistry. Then you have 18,000 crore separately for the other investment for components. So total 53,000 crore. That's substantial. So all these has actually made India really a bright spot in the entire global world, as you can see.
Right. Shashank, I want to specifically talk about the China plus one policy that world is trying to adopt, purely from supply chain point of view. We have seen what is happening in electronics manufacturing. We have seen how the semiconductor supply issue itself affected almost all companies globally, be it mobile phone manufacturers or even automobile manufacturers. Now, how India can actually leverage one is the manufacturing upswing that we are riding on. Second is the geographical location where we are right now. And third is obviously, it's a combination of, the labor cost, the reliability, the regulatory environment, and a democracy. It's a win-win sort of a situation or a combination. How India can leverage on that?
Yeah, so I think great point, because you just listed out all the conditions which are required to go to the next level in manufacturing. An automobile has to play a big role. Automobile is actually 49% of India's manufacturing sector. It's said that it is almost 7% of GDP. Exports are $28 billion, which is substantial for GDP. How to give it to the next level? And I think people are talking about Industry 4.0, which is basically about incorporating new era methods for greater efficiency. We have fortunately a very skilled manpower as far as software is concerned, as far as IT is concerned, and those areas are becoming very important part of vehicles and vehicle manufacturing. So you would have seen a self-diagnosing production line or a self-replenishing production line. The design of components getting shortened because of 3D printing, for example. You have other areas, the IoT, MI, AI, ML. They are all things which India is good at. And therefore, we are, and Maruti Suzuki actually is also utilizing much of these to take India to the next level, including investments in training, ITIs, is upskilling our workers to the new era. And I think this is happening not just in Maruti Suzuki, but across automobile sector. And surely that should take us to the next level and make our mark in the global world as well.
Right. So a quick question. As you rightly mentioned, we are currently the fourth largest automobile market in the world. By when do you see India jumping to maybe second or third spot?
So the projections are by 2025. It's not so far away. We should be number 3 behind US and China. Currently, Japan is number 3. So we should be there by 2025.
Which means, a very promising growth potential. Now, as one of the most, I would say the pillar of Indian automobile manufacturing, how are you planning your growth trajectory, considering that there are a couple of tectonic shifts which are taking place within automobile industry, e-vehicles. Second is obviously the infrastructure challenges. Third is the shifting preference from a hatchback, which has always been your domain, to slightly bigger cars, SUVs, MUVs, urban vehicles. So there are a lot of moving parts. While the pie is growing, more and more people want to jump in. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, so India's car penetration is just around 25 per 1,000, which is very low when you compare with the developed world like Japan or US, which is in the range of 700 per 1,000. So in that sense, we have a huge upside. Now the question is, how is Maruti Suzuki preparing for it, and what are our thoughts for the future? Well, the industry currently, as I just mentioned, around last year was 3.0 million. This year, probably 3.8 million. Our projections is that it should touch 6 million by 2030. And we should have half of it. So this means that we have to dominate every segment. You mentioned about 2 specific things, and I'd like to talk about. One is small cars. Small cars, is true that the small car percentage of the overall market has come down from about 45% to about 36-37% today. SUVs have gone up from roughly around 16% 5 years back. Last year it was 40%. This year so far about 42%. There is clearly a shift for consumers to prefer design elements of the SUV, the upright, the bold upright stance, the high ground clearance, and the maybe flexible usage of interior space. But, Piyushji was also mentioning a few minutes back, India is a very young country demographically. So in India, 65% of the population is below 35 years. We have a large number of people coming into the workforce. First-time buyers are roughly 45-47% for the last 25 years. That's really consistent and very strong, some of the highest percentages in the world. So the demand for personal mobility and personal transit will be there. Only thing is, how do you tap it? Currently, in the last 3 years, it has come down, as we just mentioned, because of the affordability factor coming down, prices rising faster because of commodities, regulatory stringency, and so on and so forth. And I am sure that going forward, that sector will also jump. By the way, it is last year, it was 11 lakh 60,000 in the market of 30 lakh. SUVs were 12 lakh 30,000. So there's not such a big gap. So we have to dominate all these segments if Maruti, and that's our plan for the future. You talked of EV, and I think here everybody does have some opinion on EV and the direction in which takes. The consensus in the industry is that EVs will become mainstream going forward. So it's not a question of whether, it's a question of when.
You believe so? It will become mainstream in a
Yeah,
country
so
like India?
Yeah, so I'm coming to that. So there are different projections based on different things, electricity requirement, price, the battery prices coming down, the whether in India EVs are really contributing. So the tailpipe emission might be low, but the well-to-wheel may be high because you produce electricity from thermal sources which might be polluting. So you might just be shifting pollution from tailgate of from the tailpipe to somewhere else where you produce electricity. But even we assume that later on India will produce electricity through renewables, even if you assume that, the cost of battery is not yet come down the way it was planned to. And as a result, most of the analysts are predicting that by 2030, the penetration of EVs in our country would be roughly 17%. So out of those 6 million of 2030 market, 1 million will be EVs. And I think the road to that, and if you just make a simple calculation here, 6 million, 5 million will be ICE vehicles. What do you do about those 5 million vehicles? You need to do something about emission, right, for the environment. So we believe that it is very important to make sure that the existing vehicle are made more fuel efficient. And you can try different technologies. In other words, you can be technology agnostic for reducing emissions, like CNG, like biogas, like flexi-fuel, like hydrogen technology. All technologies are available. And today, if you see, CNG, Maruti Suzuki has just crossed the 1 million sale mark in CNG. That has saved 1.1 million ton of CO2 emissions. So our thinking is that the way to electric vehicles will be through electrification, that is through the hybrids.
Right. It's an interesting initiative that you have, Mission Green Million. Can you just tell us about that? What exactly is the plan?
So I just mentioned Mission Green Million actually talks about the mission to produce environment-friendly vehicles, whether it is through CNG or whether it is through flexi-fuel, whether it is biogas, whether it is other technologies that are available. Very recently, we introduced the strong hybrid technology in our Grand Vitara. It's a large SUV, but it gives you almost 25 kilometers to the liter. In fact, the rated figure is 27 kilometers, 27.7 kilometers to the liter. That means the carbon dioxide emission for even those large vehicles we have been successful in reducing. So what we mean by green mission is that to make the emissions from vehicle as low as possible, and also the method of production also should reflect that. So it talks about sustainability, it talks about recycling. We are, for example, producing much of our energy from solar. That's something which, and in fact, even the electricity that we use, we produce through gas and rather than thermal means, or taking it from the grid, because the grid sometimes the supply is not uniform or not always efficient. So that is what we mean by our green mission.
Right. You have in fact recently launched a massive plant also on the West Coast. And like you rightly mentioned, that in the global supply chain, India is definitely emerging as a major supply hub for spare parts also, and for the fully built vehicles also. So what is your vision in next 5 to 10 years? What kind of market share shift may happen from the existing manufacturing hubs like, let's say, China to countries like India?
Yeah, I think the potential is huge. Indian export this year, I mean 21-22 was 5,77,000. I'm talking of passenger vehicles. There was a 43% growth. The previous year was just 4,04,000. This year, 22-23, it will be even higher. Maruti Suzuki, by the way, 237,000 vehicles we exported last year, and this year it will be even higher. So in that sense, the potential for us and India as a country to supply automobile, both finished goods and the components, is very high. Our exports, I'm talking of the auto industry, $28 billion out of the $420 billion of exports from India, which means about 7-8%. But if you look at the percentage of the total auto industry, then this 28 billion, our total auto industry is about $117 billion. That means 25% of the output of automobile industry in our country is exported. And of those 28 billions, you'll be very surprised, $10 billion is $10 billion is vehicles, and 18 billion is components. So there is a huge potential to supply across the world. And I think you will see tectonic shifts in the auto sector moving towards India as the global hub for manufacturing for automobiles.
And I'm assuming Maruti will obviously take pole position in this transformation.
Yeah, taking or I think continuing, because we are already in the
I know. What I meant was in the shifting market share scenario.
Yes.
One last question to you. If we look at I won't use the word headwinds because the industry is doing exceptionally well. But let's put it this way, the global economic scenario right now, right from fuel costs to the geopolitical conflicts to the interest rate environment. What is your sense? How is it going to impact the consumption in automobile sector? Because it's directly linked to employment and everything else.
Clearly, it's a question which requires a lot of thought, and that's something which the industry has been struggling to answer. So all the current parameters show, and I mentioned that whether it is actual sales or that it is retail, these are at record highs. They are at record highs, and not by small amounts, by huge amounts. Like 3.5 million in the calendar year already crossed what was the peak in 2018. In November itself, we have crossed that. But yes, we have to be circumspect and careful just to detect if headwinds are building up. There are some which I can talk of, like the higher interest rates. We find that post the festive season, the retail interest rates start climbing up, because earlier, even though the repo rates have been increased many times because of the inflation pressures, it was not translated into retail rates. Now, they are now reflecting in the retail rates as well. So that's one headwind which I can think of. Second is, I think, since the auto industry is very closely related with the GDP per capita growth, which is the economic growth, it's to people who are mathematically oriented, the correlation, the R square factor is 0.983, which is a heavy correlation. So obviously, anything which impacts negatively the economic growth will negatively impact the auto growth also, as far as domestic consumption is concerned. And we are seeing that there is a downward revision in some of, as the conditions emerge. Third is in response to the inflation, which is very sticky. Hopefully Q4 will be better, but still high. We have seen these repo rate increases. And that might affect the liquidity going forward. In trade, in automobile trade, there is a huge requirement of money capital, especially if you see retail financing, whether it is inventory financing. So I think these are the couple of headwinds which I can think of, apart from the semiconductor supply side issue, which is getting better, of course, all the time.
Right. But despite those challenges, India definitely is in a global bright spot. And hopefully we'll make most of it. Thank you so much, Shashank. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you. Thank you.